So this talk that I'm going to give is going to be super low tech, and also mostly non-technical. It's kind of a dream that the best e-commerce site that I wish I could build. So I'm going to start my slides. You all should be seeing a text editor. Brilliant. Okay, so the e-commerce site that I wish I could build, it is I, and this is where you're going to find me on the Twitters, otherwise on the Discord channel. Yeah, year is 2019. Everything is ruled by JavaScript frameworks. Everything is super heavy. Everyone has fast internet access, and running JavaScript isn't really a problem for anyone because we all have iPhones and top of the line machines, and parsing multiple hundreds of JavaScript files and then interaction between them is just totally fine. And I kind of feel like we've lost our way from back in the early 2000s or even the late 90s, where HTML and HTML was awesome. CSS wasn't even a thing. And occasionally I wish we could go back there. So my background, I've been doing e-commerce sites for the better part of the last 5 years. I worked with WooCommerce a lot. For those of you who don't come from a PHP/WordPress background, WooCommerce is an e-commerce framework that you install as a plugin on your WordPress site. And then you can set up products and then install gateways. And then you can turn your WordPress site into an e-commerce store and start collecting money selling your things to pretty much anyone on Earth. I worked with a lot of different types of sites, some selling digital goods like memberships or downloadable codes, others selling physical products like audio equipment, and then yet others selling FMCG goods, essentially the e-commerce store of the big supermarket chains that you would go into Texas and surrounding states. I've seen both the developer side, the business management side of it, and also the customer and user sides of pretty much all of these sites. So I think I have a fairly 360 view of what everything needs just to be on the buzzword train. And most of these sites were, I think, unnecessarily heavy. So my wish list for an e-commerce site is it's fast, simple, light, and only asks you for what they actually need to fulfill the transaction and absolutely nothing more. And I'm going to sort of dive into each of these points. But what is an e-commerce site? First and foremost, essentially someone has services or products that they wish to sell. Other people have a need for those services or products, and there should be a way to exchange money for these services and products, and then provide the sufficient data to complete the purchase. Also insert that Simpsons gif where Homer is trying to figure out what he can use the $20 note for. That's pretty much it. Everything else above it is fluff. So let's start with what it needs and not more. Obviously, when there's any sort of monetary transaction taking place, each country will have some sort of regulatory framework that details the kind of data that you need to give the other in order for that transaction to be legitimate. If you're using a credit card-based payment gateway, you need to give them the credit card number, expiration date, CVV, which is fine because without that, no payment can take place. Occasionally, though, the tax authority will say, hey, by the way, we also need to connect the billing address for this car that's being used. So that usually means the first name, last name, address details, and that's pretty much it. Um, if you're shipping some products, you also need a shipping address because otherwise you don't know where you're going to ship your product to. But every other detail outside of those is or should be optional or not even asked. Like, why would someone need the birthday? It isn't needed. Also, if you're surrendering someone else's birthday because you're buying a, I don't know, birthday present for your cousin, and you give the site your cousin's birthday, you're essentially surrendering your cousin's personal data without your cousin's permission, which again kind of goes into privacy and data protection um, waters, which isn't exactly something that you willingly want to deal with. A survey on how you found the site, again, not really needed. I very regularly stumble upon sites where there's a, hey, can we just ask like 3 questions? And I always click away. Some others that you might have come across, the site wants you to show notifications. No one in their right mind would want a site to show them notifications, like, ever. The only uh, exception to that, to me, is Gmail, and I think I kind of forgot about that rule, and I don't mind, and I'm like lazy to turn it off, but I don't want the site to show me notifications. I don't want the site to know my location. I don't want to sign up for 10% off. I mean, maybe I do, but I will immediately hit the unsubscribe button as soon as I use the 10% off. I don't want to sign up to be notified for whatever. I don't want to give you my birthday. I do need to accept terms and conditions, which is totally fair, but I don't want to sign up for your daily marketing stuff. I don't want you to know where I live outside of what you need to know legally about me. But if I'm just browsing the site, no, you don't want to do that. Not even if you're going to want to show me the closest dealership, I will find it. What's your social security number? Because companies have never lost the social security number, like, ever. Blood type, would you like fries with that? Would you recommend us to a friend? I've seen a site that was like, hey, give us 5 friends' email, and then you're going to get 10% off. Again, you're surrendering other people's personal data. Don't do that. And would you like to put the site on your home screen if you happen to be on a mobile device? The best, though, is once you get a marketing email, and then they have an unsubscribe link in that marketing email, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. Or you can't even click on it. Let's move on to Light. So in 2019, most of the websites that I visit have incredible amounts of JavaScript on it. I really just want sites to not have JavaScript on it. They are used in the following scenarios. Because the site is built with React or Vue or Angular or Ember.js or whatever other MVC framework there is, or because there's a stream for some missing browser thingy. It was a huge thing back in the days of IE 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11. I'm not sure whether Edge still has a need for shims, or because the design is fancy. I especially hate when sites do scroll hijacking, or rarely because the payment gateway itself actually needs it. One example is Stripe and its JavaScript SDK. The way it works is that it needs to have a JavaScript thing to insert an iframe element so that Stripe can handle the PCI DSS compliance, and then your website doesn't actually need to be PCI compliant. But other than that, HTML and CSS should be more than enough for 98% of the sites. And you can design sites today with these two where you don't actually need to use JavaScript. And it will probably work in all the browsers as well, because you're not using things that don't work without using more things to make those things work. Also, no JavaScript, smaller payloads, shorter development times. And yeah, it's not going to be as fancy and as Swish, but you can also use hosted gateways that will deal with the JavaScripty bits on their own. So that's light. Simple. You should be able to land on a site, find a product, add it to cart, make it to the checkout, hand over the necessary details, click confirm, and you should be done. Instead, what we have are 400 different pop-ups, weird selectors and configurators, uh, multiple upsell and cross-sell steps that, just before you go, have you considered, sign up before you check out. And it's just annoying. Imagine you're a repeat customer and you've already gone through these steps a number of times and the site is not new to you. Essentially, you have the site memorized because it's something you do fairly often because whatever reason. And then you're still forced to go through all of these unnecessary bits. It should be simpler. Not to mention that the simpler the website, the faster the development, which means fewer possible issues, lower maintenance cost, shorter turnaround time because then they don't need to develop that much stuff, which translates to lower development cost, smaller code base, which means it's easier to reason about, it's easier to figure out what does what, therefore lower development costs. And most of the drivers on an e-commerce site is essentially just a bunch of form elements. And if you leave the form elements as they are, instead of replacing them with like fancy divs and spans and whatnot, then most of the browsers on different devices will be able to just handle it. Not to mention the accessibility considerations of it, because like one of the most hold on a second. Apologies. One of the most common form element to be replaced is the select element, where you have many select options, and then you type as you, or it searches as you type, which is kind of okay, but I still think that it could be simpler or just handled with a simple select element. An e-commerce should be fast, and at this point, if you took care of everything above up until this point, your site is going to end up being fast without you pretty much doing anything else. It's going to be fast as a consequence. Because of this, you might be able to have your entire site as a static site. If it's a static site, then you can put a CDN in front of it, and that will handle most of the traffic. Except for the checkout page where you actually need to record data. You can leverage a lot of caching, and still you should be using a good host. Now, because these are e-commerce sites, there will be conflicts of interest. One of them is try to use as little CSS as possible, but that goes against marketing and their branding guidelines. So that's a conversation to have, and those are interests to balance. There's also the business development people who want to have as much data about their visitors and customers and people just browsing versus simplicity, which is why you end up with sites that have 477,000 different trackers on it that will collate all the data from like different providers, and then you end up in a situation where you as a customer land on a website, and then like 3 minutes later someone calls you on your phone from the company and starts with, "Hi, I see you're browsing our website. How can we help?" Um, that's super intrusive, and you shouldn't do that. Then you have to balance the no JavaScript thing versus the ad tech. Some of the sites also have income by serving you ads or promotions to other sites. Without JavaScript, there's not much. I mean, you can create links, referral links, which are just a elements. Um, but most of these work with JavaScript. And then there's the whole customer customer relations people versus the non-intrusive thing. So your intercom widget in the bottom right corner is obviously powered by JavaScript. It isn't actually needed um, most of the time. And I had one more thought and I forgot what it was. So I'm just going to skip over that one. But pretty much as a summary, I wish to build an e-commerce site that is only HTML and CSS, which would also make it accessible, provided that the HTML is structured in the correct way. I would love to build an e-commerce site that is built for screen readers and keyboard users first and foremost, and everything else kind of comes on top of it, and everything else follows that one. I would love to build an e-commerce site that is a static site. Obviously, the parts that need to be non-static are non-static. If you do stock control, this could be rough because sometimes you do need to figure out whether a product is still available, whether there are any that you can still sell. But if you set up your business in such a way that even if you've run out of your current stock, if you have orders coming in, you can just back order and you can keep fulfilling your orders, that's fine. Then you don't need to deal with inventory. I wish to build an e-commerce site where there are optimized images so that when you land on a page, it doesn't download 47 megabytes. I wish to build an e-commerce site that doesn't have JavaScript like at all. I wish to build an e-commerce site that uses hosted pay pages. So when you click checkout, you're redirected to Stripe.com or PayPal.com or whatever payment gateway you're using that hosted pages. And I wish to build an e-commerce site where you're using the defaults as much as you can, because most of the customizations don't actually get you that much of an edge over the others. They don't actually give you that much more conversion, but it becomes a lot more pain to develop and maintain. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to add from myself. So questions?
Yay, that was cool. I think that this is a really interesting concept. I feel like you can build very accessible sites with JavaScript, but a lot of people, when they let JavaScript run away, then it becomes very inaccessible very quickly. But because like businesses and stuff have to exist and everything, there is kind of a time and place for marketing and for the business development and stuff. And so in order to make up for whatever like sales losses there might be, what sort of ideas do you have in terms of like how do you keep the customers coming back besides just a good experience to be able to be able to keep people coming back to your ultra simple site when they're used to the flashy ones that use all of these intrusive things that aren't necessarily the right way to do it, but
Right.
it's
So one of the things that I see being balanced is we have to have these things so that marketing can achieve their goals. But by using these things, we're going to get our page load from, I don't know, 0.4 seconds to 4 seconds. And we are actually losing a lot of people because our page load went from 0.4 to 4 seconds. Amazon had or did a study where they pretty much said that every zero point 0.1 second costs you about 6% conversions. I'm not 100% on those numbers, but it was a lot. Essentially, make the site as fast as possible, and then if you can make this site super slick and fast as possible, that's awesome. But also keep in mind that not everyone has an iPhone 11, which is going to be fast in pretty much any complex site that you can throw at it. Some people have entry-level Android devices with JavaScript parsing scores that are super low. As long as your site can work on those, sure, go ahead and make it slick. The conflict I see is that developers and business people kind of forget that there are people not using the latest technology or technology that was launched in the past 3 years, or everyone has fast internet and no one's getting stuck in the middle of absolute nowhere with barely any data connection that they need to look up a garage um, suddenly because their car won't start. Or they want to go to a restaurant and it is frustrating to having to spend 10 minutes to kind of find the um, address, phone number, and menu in HTML format because their menu is a PDF downloadable thing, which they can't download and open because their phone doesn't have the necessary free space to download a 47 megabyte PDF. And even then they couldn't open it because the phone CPU isn't strong enough. So I think as long as you allow people to do the things that they went there to do in the first place, and they can do it fast, you should be fine. If you can then make it super slick while keeping in those, then fine.
Yeah,
That's
I totally agree with you, and I think more than JavaScript, obviously I like JavaScript, but more than JavaScript, I do think like PDF downloads, big images, and not optimizing what you're writing is the pain of a lot of these talks and or a lot of these websites, and the reason why so many people can't actually use them. And I think though I can't see a total Node.js world, just because not Node.js, Node.js world, I think that reducing JavaScript and being smart about it and discerning about when you make actual calls and when you include actual code and everything to run something, that is a good solution, because then you're not depending on being just like, well, let's pull in a billion amounts of data all over the place.
Yeah. The other thing is, though, there are some people, especially at-risk people, who disable JavaScript by default on everything. So at the minimum, your site needs to work without JavaScript, full stop, because otherwise it's not accessible. So JavaScript to me is progressive enhancement. It's awesome, but your site definitely needs to work without JavaScript to begin with.
So would you be suggesting server-side rendering everything, or just not having dynamic websites at all?
Honestly, I don't know, because I've never used server-side rendering. I've never used Vue.js or React.js or any of the MVC frameworks in this regard. So I don't know what that actually means. I would say as long as the end result, like, everything in the web is a client, usually that's your browser, making a HTTP request to a server, and then the server responds with essentially text, and then your client parses that text and decides what to do with it. Your browser will interpret the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then give you a graphical thing, and then you can interact with it. As long as you, the client, get back as minimum data as feasible or possible without too much JavaScript, I really don't care what happens on the server side. if that makes sense. So if it's a static HTML page, then that. If you do server-side rendering and then serve the result of that, then fine.
Yeah, I was all thinking of like templating, like how Amazon will show you discounts because it'll just build the web page just from points from the database and then send it down without it could do it without JavaScript. So it just builds it back and then sends that down.
You can do that. I mean, WooCommerce does that. I'm pretty sure that I could create an e-commerce site based on WordPress and WooCommerce that doesn't use any JavaScript at all, using their templating bits. A coupon or something could be just a link with an additional GET request, with an additional query parameter on it that will get applied. It's fine, I think.
Cool. Well, are there any other questions or comments, concerns, hurt feelings?
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to post a link on the Discord to where I can buy a Party Parrot T-shirt.
Okay. I shall do that.
I was curious in this sort of line of discussion, do people test their websites with text mode browsers? Because that's something I used to do, but I haven't done web development in such a long time.
Not in my experience. All the companies and agencies that I have ever worked for, testing was always out of scope, couldn't fit in the budget, couldn't fit in the time. So like not even text-based browsers, any testing. So testing was always done in production, which isn't the best.
This is where I say not all teams.
Which is why I said all teams that I have worked with so far. Yeah. I long for a day where I can join a team where this is, a required part of the workflow.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience.
Yeah, I know, like my boss in particular, he actually, my team, we maintain Reach UI, which is supposed to be, it's ultra React components, and to test those, like we have a bunch of really old like Motorola phones and stuff, and feature phones that can access the internet, but they're terrible, and we try to throttle networks and stuff, and so we try to test on as like crappy devices as we can, so that way we can see, are these things actually truly accessible or optimized in the right way. But that's definitely more JavaScript focused rather than just straight HTML CSS rendering.
Cool. That's also an awesome thing to do as part of your job, and I wish everyone had that kind of foresight and access and budgetary considerations where that can be a thing.
Yeah. It's definitely a thing for privileged teams who have the time to be able to do that.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. I think I'm done then.
Woohoo! Yay! Everybody's like perfectly mimicking the clapping emoji, and it's delightful. Yeah.